Good morning, everyone. Brent Long is out of town this week, so I'll be chairing the meeting as vice chair. This is an electronic meeting in accordance with Tennessee Governor Lee's Executive Order 51, extending safe, open, and transparent public meetings by electronic means, while determinations for how to return safe in-person meetings remain ongoing. I will call the meeting to order at this time. Lindsay, if you will do roll call.
Hank Carr.
Here.
Shannon Castillo.
Here.
Tracy Johnson.
Here.
Jody Jones. Brent Long. Freddie Malone.
Here.
Aaron Murphy.
Here, and I want to inform you all I'll have to leave the meeting early today.
Okay. Lindsay Nichols.
Here.
William Roller.
Here.
Seth Thomas.
Here.
Craig Torbett.
Here.
Robert Williams.
Here.
And Joe Wise, who's not here yet. Okay, we're good.
Thanks, Lindsay. The September minutes are in your packet. If you've had a chance to review, great. Just wanted to see if there are any corrections. If not, if someone would make a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Lindsay, will you do roll call?
Was that Robert who's second?
I think both Seth and I said at the same
Okay.
times.
All right. Hank Carr.
Yes.
Shannon Castillo.
Yes.
Tracy Johnson.
Yes.
Freddie Malone.
Yes.
Aaron Murphy.
Yes.
Lindsay Nichols.
Yes.
William Roller. Seth Thomas.
Yes.
Craig Torbett. And Robert Williams.
Yes.
I'm a yes also. Couldn't get it unmuted. Sorry.
That's fine. I got it.
Thanks, Lindsay. Motion passes. The next on the agenda is the approval of the July and August financials. Jim, will you present the financial reports?
Yes, I will. I will talk today about both July and August. And just to let you know, the financial operations here are running on time now and in order. I think we're back to where we should be. Because the August year-to-date results are more current and contain all of the July activity, I'll only hit the highlights of July and then move straight to August. In July, our first month of the fiscal year, the JCDA had revenue of $130,000 and expenses of $107,000 for an excess or profit of $23,000. The total cash balance at July 31 was $2,869,000, which was up $23,000 from the previous month, reflecting the income in the month. The month of July was very close to budget and contained no significant surprises. Now I'll move straight into August month and year-to-date report and cover that in a bit more detail. During the month of August, we had revenue of $89,000 and expenses of $105,000 for a net deficit of $15,000. This excludes $505,000 in loan repayment costs, which were incurred on August 26th. Since the loan repayment skews the results for the first 2 months, I'll just report the key numbers before the loan payment and after the loan payment to give you a clearer picture of the actual operating results. The month of August was pretty much right on budget, with the exception of the closing cost of the loan repayment of $5,525 that were not in the original budget. Including the full loan repayment and costs, we had a net deficit or loss in the month of $520,000. And year to date, the net deficit was $498,000, sorry. Taking a look at the balance sheet on pages 15 and 16 of the packet, you can see that in current assets, the cash position at August 31 was $2,347,727. And this is down $520,000 from July, due primarily to the loan repayment I just covered. Regarding the cash balances, there was $1.4 million in the TIF account, $291,000 in the operating account, $193,000 in the savings account, $201,000 in the downtown center TIF fund, $57,000 in the John Sevier reserve account, $192,000 in the John Sevier rental account, and $32,000 in the John Sevier security account. The total fund balances at August 31 were $2,346,633, of which $1,505,463 is restricted for TIF projects and John Sevier. The total unrestricted fund balance was $841,169. Looking at the statement of revenues and expenses on pages 17 through 19, we can see that for the first 2 fiscal months of the year, revenue totaled $220,000, of which $49,000 is operating revenue and $171,000 is the John Sevier revenue. There was no TIF revenue in the first 2 months of the year, which is as we expected. That starts in March. On pages 21 through 23, you'll see that year-to-date total expenditures were $718,000, of which $505,000 is the loan repayment and related fees. Excluding the loan repayment, year-to-date expenditures were $213,000. When comparing the annual budget versus actual figures on pages 20 through 23, 9.7% of the budgeted revenue was received in the first 2 months of the year. This is compared to 8.7% of budgeted expenses in the first 2 months, and that is excluding the loan repayment. Including the loan repayment, 29.5% of budgeted expenses were incurred in the first 2 months of the year, as shown on page 23. The excess of revenue over expenditures for the first 2 months was a deficit of $498,000, including the loan repayment. Excluding the loan repayment, the excess of revenue over expenditures for the first 2 months was a positive amount of $7,763. That concludes the report. Are there any questions about June and the year-to-date financial highlights?
Jim, when you talk about those budget variances, you're speaking of the first 2 months against the full year's revenue and the full year's anticipated expenses, correct?
That's right, because we report it that way. We show the budget for the full year, yes.
Okay.
This is Craig. I'll move approval of the financials as presented.
This is Jody. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Lindsay, will you do the roll call, please?
Yes. Hank Carr,
Yes.
Shannon Castillo,
Yes.
Lucy Johnson,
Yes.
Jody Jones,
Yes.
Freddie Malone,
Yes.
Aaron Murphy,
Yes.
Lindsay Nichols,
Yeah.
William Roller,
Yes.
Seth Thomas,
Yes.
Craig Torbett,
Yes.
Robert Williams,
Yes.
and Joe Wise.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Lindsay. We'll move on now to committee reports. The first report is Human Resources. The HR committee reached out to Summit leadership for the evaluation process for the executive director, as everyone knows. Thank you for those two who completed the evaluation request. And I believe we have Dave McCauley on the call at this point, and I'll turn things over to him to lead us through the process.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. And before I get started on this, let me just say that doing this process with the JCDA board and Diana participation in it too. There was just a high level of engagement and thoughtfulness in the responses that I got. So I just want to commend everybody for that as we get started on this. And we had all but really 2 responses when it all from everybody that we surveyed on this. So we had all the JCDA board members and then 4 local government officials that responded to the survey. And the basic question is on the top of this slide. It was a simple survey. As you have observed Diana Cantler's performance over the last year or 2, what do you see as her top 3 strengths and what are her top 3 areas that need improvement and growth? And when I talked to Brent Long about doing this about a month ago, I guess, is when we first had the conversation, I really feel like it's important for us to be forward-looking, look back over the last year or 2, but as you move forward as an organization, what do we need to put in place that would help the executive director and the JCDA team be set up for success? And that was one of the premises as we went into this. Let's discover what the top strengths are because we want to maximize strengths. And then let's look at some areas that the board has observed that could use growth. And we all know that as leaders, as an individuals, we can have blind spots and we can have areas that we're just not as strong at and that we need to pay some attention to, and we may need some help and support with that. So that's the spirit of how we conducted this survey. The top strengths that came out, and what I did on this is we had a lot of various responses, but there were patterns that emerged within the comments that were made. So what I wanted to do to simplify the final results was to narrow those down into shooting for 3 categories of strengths and 3 on the areas for growth, but we ended up with 4 on the strengths because we had a tie on those bottom 2. So what you see on these is marketing and event planning. There were 12 responses that referred to Diana having a lot of strength in the area of marketing, planning events, and everything was, almost every response was in particular or gave examples of things that she has done in downtown Johnson City. The second one was strong work ethic and capacity. It's a huge job, and that Diana has the word tenacity came out on some of that, of being able to stick with something and see it through. And there were 11 responses that fit into that category. And then passionate and energetic was tied with professional networking and connections. And I think both of those are under the people skills kind of general category that are areas of strength for her. And I want to move on. I'm going to move through these because y'all have these reports, and I just want to talk briefly about what the recommendation is at the end. So the next one, this is the areas of the next slide, top areas for improvement and growth. So we came across organization and communication became one, top one, and I kind of combined those because there's a lot of people made reference to things like organization, in response to maybe things not being ready for a meeting, or in communication where some people felt they were communicated to and maybe a few other people felt that they got left out of the communication loop. And so those kind of got put together, and that's why we have 19 responses there, but that emerged as probably as a combined organization communication, which there is linkage between those, is the top area that we probably need to focus on. Again, not looking at this as something that, that's a weakness. It's something that we just need to pay attention to and provide support and accountability in these areas. And then the next one was on strategic leadership. And this kind of played itself out in kind of things like sometimes not being able to delegate, not delegating when it needed to be delegated, or asking for help in some particular situations. So strategic leadership is really the ability in many levels to get ahead of everything and not be in a reactive mode, but start trying to figure out what your strategy is that you want to utilize moving forward. And that is one of the areas that is particularly helpful to have coaching in that. And then there were 7 responses, and I actually got one survey that came in well after the deadline, somebody that had been out of town, and their responses, they didn't see any of this when they sent it in, but they were pretty much in agreement with these, so we can almost add 1 to each of these. But TIF and business experience, this is more the technical knowledge side of getting some of the business done for the JCDA, and there were 7 responses along those lines. So those are the areas for improvement and growth. So let's go to the next slide if we could, Diana, and then I'm going to have time. We've allowed time in the agenda here for any questions that y'all may have. So feel free to either send those via. We'll just, I guess, open it up for question on that. So these are the recommendations I would have after just working with the board on this. And by the way, had several conversations with many of you. So we did the survey. I probably had a couple of phone calls for clarifications and questions about how to fill it out. Again, I like that level of engagement. I do want to commend Diana on this. She did this herself as well. And there's nothing more difficult than doing a self-evaluation. And she took a lot of time doing it. It's a 2-page, very detailed self-evaluation of what she sees as her strengths and weaknesses and or areas for growth. And so I want to commend her for that, because this is a very public process, if you will, of having your strengths and your areas for growth acknowledged. But here's my recommendations moving forward is, and this is something that I do with a lot of different executive teams and companies. I'm not trying to do a sales pitch on this. My interest is in serving the JCDA, and these are my recommendations, whether you use me or whether you get somebody else to help with this. But I do think with the nature and the dynamic changes and challenges that you face as an organization, having someone help guide processes and keep the main thing in front of people, providing regular accountability and support would be a key role for an outside player, a coach to doing this. So I'm recommending a 12-month growth and coaching plan for the executive director. This could include, and I'm recommending that it would include somebody from the HR committee or another person from the board. Team members on the staff could be even involved in this. Do a lot of this with companies where we actually on executive coaching will include other team members in that process for the sake of transparency and accountability and support. But we would look at the areas of strengths and try to figure out how do we continue to maximize those areas. And I use a basic model that is referred to as the 70-30 principle. And that is you want somebody in their strength areas at least 70% of the time that they're performing, so that they have the energy and focus and margin to deal with those things that they're not as naturally wired to take on. That becomes the 30%. And there's always those things in our jobs. So that's part of the discussion in the coaching plan, is managing that balance. And then one of the things that we would need from the board is just very clear, prioritized, and measurable objectives for 2021. Again, whether I'm involved with this or not, this is just going to really help the team and the executive director to have clear marching orders for the year. And on that, I would keep that fairly narrowed down to where it's maybe no more than 3 major objectives. Now, I know there's more things than that need to be done, but what are the 3 major objectives for the year? And then build an actual measurable dashboard that would measure progress on that throughout the year. And that would be extremely helpful, I think, as far as the staff staying focused on the main thing, that there would be some alignment, clarity and alignment. That is one thing that that's in the report that I think I would recommend for the board, is to focus on clarity and alignment between the board and the executive director and staff. And then the final kind of added value, I think, to doing this, if you did this over this next year, is the actual process itself would support an annual review process, something that you haven't had consistently, and it's hard to do. But if you have these monthly check-ins and you have a dashboard, and each month you're reporting progress and data, you have a a standing record, if you will, at the end of the year as to what has been done, what hasn't been done, how close we got to particular goals in a month, and how, where we exceeded. And it actually documents very clearly when you sit as a board and want to do an annual review, everybody has the documentation in front of them. So that's one of the advantages to this. And then I'll wrap up because I want to be sensitive to your time today. You all have a full agenda. The final slide, just quickly overview what a coaching process looks like. I've been doing this for over 40 years now and have spent a lot of time in this area. I'm certified with John Maxwell, if any of y'all are familiar with him, and spent 2 years in a mentor program with him in person, and then also got certified in a program called 5 Voices, which is very similar to DISC. It's a personality based system that is all built around communication and how people communicate. And I use those within the coaching process, but this is what I refer to as the FEED framework. If any of you have read the 4 Disciplines of Execution by McChesney, Covey, and Hewley, you'll recognize kind of a pattern behind this. But one of the things that we want to do is, and this would be a monthly process where we would have the objectives for the year, and each month we would meet with the executive director, and HR person, and or some team members if that was appropriate. And we would look at what are the 2 to 3 things that we need to focus on in the next 30 days. Now there's lots of things going on. There's 100 things that need to be get done, but we're going to put more focused energy into 2 or 3 things that we see as the most important, again, based on the priorities through the direction of the board. And now we're going to focus on those things because we want more energy into less things. The second thing that we want to do is with anybody that is going through this process and working on these things, we have to manage energy. Energy of the executive director, energy of the team. It's kind of finding balance in the workplace is hard to do, but we got to get into a rhythm. There are times where you will have days and weeks, and this is true for everybody, where you just got to put in the big hours one week and there's just no end to it. So sometimes we have to find the rhythm and figure out how we're going to rest and recuperate. So the principle behind the energy factor is people have to be at their best to do the most. And so we have to figure out how do we look after the well-being of the executive director. And part of that is the 70-30 balance. Part of that is making sure that we're spending enough time on things that they would find fulfilling in the areas of their strengths. And those things will provide the energy needed to do the hard stuff or to get through the difficult weeks. So we always need to keep our pulse on where the energy is and prevent possibility for burnout, or what happens with a lot of us when we start reducing energy is we may be putting in the hours, but we're performing maybe at 60% of what our true capacity would be. So we need to be rested and we need to have the right energy to perform at our best. Engagement piece, which I think is really important for y'all. This would be an intentional plan every month to proactively, intentionally think through everybody we need to communicate with over this next month. And it's a way to get ahead on communication. How do we, and we think 360 degrees on this. So this would be to the board, this would be to peers, this would be to possibly vendors, shop owners, the media. We would just be sitting down and really thinking through, going through an exercise of who really, with the 2 to 3 things that we're focused on this month, who do we need to keep in the loop, and not after, but proactively engage them in that and get their input, make sure we have their buy-in and get their opinions of what we're doing. And then finally, the design piece is just really the idea of creating a scoreboard. When we have those clear objectives for the next year, I kind of think about this as building plans. If you think about architectural plans, if we have the overall plan kind of laid out, the design of what we're trying to accomplish over this next year, and if we're coming in and working on one piece of that plan, it's clear to us how that piece that we're working on this month works with the entire plan. It's sort of like the plumber who's roughing in plumbing on a construction site. When they know what the overall plan is, it makes sense to why they're putting the pipes where they put them. So that's part of that design process. So that's a quick overview. And I know we have limited time today, but let me just say if I can answer any questions of any of these things offline for clarification on anything, y'all have my email address. And if I can serve you in that way, I'd be happy to. On the coaching plan, if you wanted to move forward with it, The fee structure for local coaching for me, and it's a outcome-based coaching plan with full access. So in other words, we would meet for an hour, basically as a typical session once a month to go through this feed process. There would be some pre-work, and then there would be follow-up accountability and support through the rest of the month. And that would be via email and phone calls primarily, or text, and try to keep everybody on track with what they're doing. But the fee for that is $600 per month. Again, I'm not trying to sell that. That's a value added though, and it's something that I think would help you, move some of this stuff forward. I do recommend a 1 year, and finally too, and a lot of you can relate to this, January's coming up, and we all know about New Year's resolutions. When you start into a coaching plan, it does act a lot like a New Year's resolution, where when we start into this, it will take several months. It would probably take 3 to 6 months to start seeing progress or fruit from the process. And we need to know that going in. That's part of the process. It's just like in January when I go on a diet and then Super Bowl weekend comes along and I hit a dip. And then it's National Pancake Day, and then it's Valentine's Day. And before I know it, I'm not doing so well on the diet that I had set out to pursue on January 1st. So that's called the dip in coaching. And we will experience that as we get into this, some of the habits and distractions and just the demands of getting in the rhythm of doing it. It takes a little practice. It's sort of like learning a golf swing or learning how to play an instrument. It just, it takes a little bit to get the feel of it. So that's what I would recommend. It won't do you any good to do coaching for 3 months. I would recommend a year commitment to it. One of the reasons, and I'll just say this candidly and transparently, one of the reasons I think it would be good to have an HR director or someone on the HR team involved with the coaching process is this brings continuity to it, because I know you have a full board. Some of y'all are going to be in favor of coaching, some are not. That's just typical. But y'all have to make commitment to this. Diana needs to want it. The team needs to want it. The board needs to want it. Coaching does not work if you don't want it. It's like if nobody wants to learn how to learn an instrument or learn a golf swing, it doesn't help to hire a coach if you just don't want to do it. But as you go through this, it could happen that somewhere you decide not to continue with it for budgetary reasons or because of division on the board of seeing importance in it or not. So I think one of the recommendations would be to have someone from the HR committee join in this process. So if some reason after 6 months, and I would recommend you give it at least 6 months, I would plan for a year, but if we start it, let's do it for a minimum of 6 months. And then you decide not to continue with me or my services. There is no contract. It's got to be serving you and serving you well. Then the HR people could maybe continue with the plan. We would have a rhythm going by then. Again, I don't necessarily recommend that, but it's better than nothing, and it would be better than kind of starting this and then suddenly stopping. And I've already talked to Diana about looking at reading these 4 books during this next year. These are books that target specifically the areas of growth that she needs to look at, other than the TIF and the business experience pieces, which that's something that we can take a look at as to where we could access the knowledge needed for that. All right, so that's my report, and open for any questions or comments, pushback, whatever. Feel is to be as free and transparent as you want to be. That's how I like to do these things. So don't feel like you're going to hurt my feelings. We have a counselor on staff, and they can help me if you hurt my feelings.
Thanks, Dave. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I will remind the board that at our last board meeting, we voted and approved to do a 6-month coaching contract.
This is Aaron Murphy. May I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I like to know, how does Diana feel about this?
Yeah, that's a good question, Aaron. In fact, that's a really key, but it's kind of putting her on the spot in front of everybody, but good key question.
So I am very willing and appreciative to the board to look at this opportunity. I mean, I believe that everybody has the opportunity for growth, and I feel very comfortable working with Dave, very familiar with Summit leadership and all that they have done. And I told him I've read a couple of Maxwell books, but not this one. So I'm very open to doing whatever to grow myself professionally and our team and support the board in any way.
This is Jody. Dave, thank you. This was a great presentation. And I mean, frankly, I bet all of us are like, can I have Dave? I want Dave.
Well, y'all can. You got my number, so just holler at me.
Will the board pay for all of us to have Dave?
Yeah.
That's another issue. But I just want to clarify. I think the readings are great, and it sounds like you've identified some good targets that, you know, when I think about operationally defining them, become a bit weedier. And I'm assuming that you do drill down because communication is very broad. So now what types of communication and specifically, et cetera, and all of those categories need to be handled in that way. And I'm assuming that you use some sort of like SMART goal style strategy where there are specific strategies that you all talk about. Diana thinks about what might work for her, and then you work toward her developing habit on her own to use that strategy rather than being dependent on someone to come in and provide reminders or support to do that.
Yes, great points, Jody. Excellent. A couple things. One is for coaching, we use the kind of the image of a spotter for a weightlifter. I'm there to lend support, to challenge, to kind of settle the bar a little bit, but the person being coached is doing all the heavy lifting and the heavy work. I actually use the SMART goal system. So when we do the 2 to 3 focused goals in a month, we will use a SMART goal approach to identifying what those particular goals are for that month and within that 30-day period. The other thing that we do is we will create a scoreboard based on and if you can kind of imagine, when I do a scoreboard, it's kind of like a basketball scoreboard. It usually has 6 or 7 pieces of information on it. A lot of that is lag data of how we've done so far, but the one thing we focus on within the coaching process is lead indicators. We start looking at what do we need to adjust and change, and what habits do we need to put in place to change. And it's a proactive, so if I could give an example, so if a salesperson knows that, you know, they sold $100,000 last month and they made 50 contacts, they know that it takes at least 50 contacts to have 100,000 in sales. So this next month, the goal is not $100,000. The goal might be to make 60 contacts. That's the lead indicator. If we do that and do that well, then the sales should take care of themselves. And that's a loose example of a lead indicator, but that's kind of what we start doing during the year, is try to focus on what the lead activity would be that would drive the right results. And we focus on that each month. So if we could do 2 to 3 things each month, some of those will go into the next month, because some of them are more than a 30-day project, but usually in a year, you're moving about 10 or 12 significant items further down the track with this process.
Hey,
That's great.
Dave, this is Aaron. I'm sorry, Jody.
You're fine, Aaron. Go ahead.
All right, this is Aaron. Dave, now you're going to work with her hands-on with key performance indicators, things
Yes.
in that direction? Okay.
Yeah, so that's how we support. So we'll look at, lots of terms out here, but we're going to identify the KRAs, which are the key result areas. That's what we're going to have. That's what the board is going to lay out in their objective. What are the key result areas? And we don't want a huge list of those. If we can do about 3, that would be great. No more than 5, but what are key areas? So, one might be TIF and real estate development. One might be downtown events, but we're going to look at key result areas that we really need to get results in. And then we look at those KPIs. So you got KRAs and KPIs, but the KPIs are going to be the key performance indicators. That's what we're going to measure as we go forward during the year, is how are we doing in these key areas of attendance, of financial records coming in, of clicks on the website, even whatever those indicators might be that we're doing a good job. But then we're going to take those, Aaron, and the next step is we're going to look at those lead indicators. We'll look at what we've been doing. What do we need to do more of? What do we need to do less of? And we have this one reflective point. Now, everything's not done in that hour, but that's our touch point together. So there's pre-work to that, there's post-work to that. And to Jody's point, I'm not doing all the work on this. I'm kind of there, and we're having these meetings, and there's a rhythm or a cadence that starts taking place. And the advantage of having staff members involved with this or someone from the HR committee, then there's internal accountability and rhythm and cadence being built in it as well. So if you all decide after 6 months you don't want to continue, I would hope you would, but if you don't, there's no hard feelings. I understand you got to work within a budget. You got to work within what works for you. That's why there is no contract on this. It has to work for you. It has to be working for you. But you need to give it enough time to be able to start working.
Thank you, Dave. Does anyone have any other comments? I'm not sure that we need to do any action because we've already agreed to the 6 months, unless someone wants to make a motion to do the 12.
So Hank Carr here. I don't know that we need to make a decision for 12 months. I think, so first off, let me say thanks to Dave and to the staff, to Diana for working through this. These are always challenging processes. They're very revealing, and it's a little bit like taking a personality test. You can take it 10 times and it generally will kind of tell you the same thing, slightly different ways, but you kind of get to the root of what's on people's minds. And so I felt like the results speak accurately from my perspective. I would be interested to kind of hear what the rest of the group thinks. There's clearly an acknowledgement of strengths, and there's clearly an acknowledgement of areas for improvement. The one area that I think kind of jumps out at me is organization and communication. And with 19 responses in that area, I would suggest that's a big area for improvement. And when we talk about KPIs, or as Dave says, trying to boil this down into 3 key goals and objectives, I think you've got your 3 key areas for improvement here. You might find examples throughout I guess projects that we're working on where these can be demonstrated or show success, but these are the areas that have to grow, and substantially. Because from my perspective, I think these areas are just essential to what the role and the job description requires. So from my perspective, I believe we're on the right track. I do feel like we need to have a separate conversation as a board. We need to make some final decisions. We decided back in what it was, June or July, that we were going to run this process out and close it out on November 30th. And I want to see us do that. I want to see us close this process out and make a decision about how we're going to, what the team is going to be, and what the positions are and what the salaries are. And let's get that knocked out so that we can move on into the new year with a clean slate and a target in front of us to go work towards. So those are my thoughts. And I'll open the floor up to anybody else's.
Just a quick follow-up to Hank's comment there. We've got the 3 key coaching areas that we're going to look at for improvement. But what I'm talking about with KRAs is we probably need a clear marching order around a clear objective in a key result area that the board sees as important. I've heard things like TIF and real estate development. I've heard downtown events, the marketing process downtown. Some of those things that we need to probably put a clear metric on. When we talk about that, what would be the ideal outcome that we would like to see by this time next year or within the year? And for the board to identify that and set a bar out there that we got to work towards that is under a SMART goal, attainable, which should be stretching us, but also still within reasonable reach. So the board, probably needs to establish those benchmarks and goals And that's going to be another thing that brings some clarity and alignment, so everybody knows exactly what the expectation is, because that's where a lot of frustration comes in, is when you have that expectation gap between where people think we ought to be and where we really are.
Any more comments? Does anyone have any more comments? Okay, I believe we'll move on from here. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and the time you spent. I want to personally thank all the board members for participating, and also Diana, your willingness to be a part of this process, an active part of this process, and I'm looking forward to the growth. Okay, we'll move on to the John Sevier operations update. Hank or Jim? I'm not exactly sure who's doing that update.
Sorry, the next item in our package, I thought was the MOU, but maybe that's not it. Maybe that's not following the agenda. All right, we'll just cover John Sevier operations. So had our monthly meeting. John Sevier continues to track along in a positive way. We have hit what I'll call a fork in the road, where we need to have some conversations here in the near future about an insurance policy for the John Sevier. And we're not going to get into the details of it today, but the staff has been quite successful in kind of peeling the onion back, for lack of a better word, and figuring out what an insurance policy that belongs to the JCDA would look like, that insures the facility and insures us for both property and casualty and liability. And we're going to be meeting on Monday to talk a little bit more about that, but all indications are it's going to have a substantial savings to the John Sevier operating account if we're successful. I'm not quite sure it's as much as we think after I looked into a little bit more, but it will definitely be a savings, and that's a very positive thing. We're contractually required to carry this insurance. It's an unusual situation where in this case, we actually ask M&M to carry it and reimburse them for it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not the ideal solution, but we now have a couple of, we actually have 3 quotes, and one of them is very favorable. So that will be addressed here in the coming weeks. And then the last thing, as we kind of come in to the end of the year, looking very seriously at what the management agreement for the John Sevier looks like, whether that involves a renewal for M&M Properties or the solicitation of another management company. I've had multiple conversations with M&M over the course of the last 6 months about their management agreement, their management fees. And their position is, hey, these are our fees. They're not going to change. We love you, but this is it. And so we've started the process of seeking other potential management companies. And we are kind of coming in for what we believe to be a landing there. And we'll be bringing back to the board in November what we think is a decision that the board will need to make about who the management company is for the John Sevier. It may stay the same, it may change, but I think this board deserves the right to make a good decision. And I think we should have most of that information in front of us. We don't anticipate making any adjustments until next year, but we do need to go ahead and get some of the research done. And so staff's done a good job there and chase that down. And so we won't try to run through all the details today, but everybody needs to know that there's some big decisions coming. And I'll answer any questions you have. Next up.
Thank you, Hank. I appreciate that update. The next item on our agenda is the John Sevier disposition. I'm going to ask Robert Williams to give that report. I believe we were talking about an MOU at this time.
That's correct. Thanks, Tracy. So we do have the memorandum of understanding in front of you today for action. As you know, an MOU is just a non-binding statement between two parties, in this case, JCDA and LHP. I think we're all familiar with ALHP now. This is the firm that the disposition committee, along with some other stakeholders in the community, including the city of Johnson City and Johnson City Housing Authority and our consultant, decided was the best fit for this project to move forward. And so the next step in this process is to have an MOU. An MOU would just explain some, who the parties are. You can see in number 2 who LHP is. They're one of the largest, most successful affordable housing developers in the state of Tennessee, and one of the largest and most successful, top ranking in the U.S. I think consistently over the years, they rank in the top 50 in the U.S. You can see on number 3, I'm not going to go through the entire document because you've had it in front of you and it's fairly concise, but in number 3, it does state what our primary objectives are, which is to provide affordable housing alternatives for the current residents, and then to optimize the utilization of the John Sevier with the redevelopment and the enhancement of downtown. And so what LHP will be providing is to build or new construction of 145 units. And that's not a typo. We do have 150 units at the John Sevier currently, but because new construction is more expensive, HUD will let you reduce that number of units by 5. And again, these tenants, the current tenants, are not required to go to this new site. They can choose to go wherever they want. We're hoping that many of them see the benefit of coming to a new place. And so moving on down to number 7, this was the one concern that the disposition committee had. We cannot be, if you recall, the JCDA cannot be directly compensated for the HAP contract. That is illegal. However, there are other ways that the JCDA can be compensated. And so we had a conference call with some of the executive team at LHP, Phil and Alvin and Carrie, the 3 top executives, just to kind of go over the MOU with them and also discuss that directly. So they are aware that we would like to have some sort of compensation. And so if we do move forward with the approval of the MOU, over the next 90 days, they will be coming up with a proposal that will have multiple options that we can decide how to move forward with them. This document has been reviewed by Penn Stewart. It took a little bit longer than we originally anticipated because we were hoping to have presented this by last month, but they have reviewed it and blessed it. Again, the disposition committee has reviewed this and is recommending approval. So that will come in a form of a motion that we will be looking for a second, and then we can have any discussion or questions in regards to that.
Thank you, Robert. We do have a motion from the committee. Do we have a second?
This is Freddie Malone, second.
Any discussion?
This is Jody. I have a quick question. Robert, I heard you say site. Is there still discussion or opportunities to develop more than one site, or where has that conversation gone?
Yes, that's a great question, Jody. Absolutely. We've had discussions with LHP about having multiple sites. And we have the disposition committee working with the city of Johnson City. We've looked at a couple of sites that would qualify. You know, again, this is going to be this transaction of a HAP transfer to a new property is extremely rare. LHP has been in business for 30 years, and I think I don't know if they've done this particular type of transaction, or maybe they've done one. The firm that they're using out of Washington, D.C. has done a dozen of these. And so because of the complexity of the transaction, you really have to have a blend of both tax credit money, opportunity zone money. I mean, anywhere you can get some additional funding to reduce the amount of cost, they're going to be looking for that. And there are a couple of sites in Johnson City, or more than a couple, that that would qualify for that. And so, yes, they will be looking at more than one, but it could be where just one makes more sense. So again, they're going to come back to us over the next 90 days and present with multiple options. So that will give us the opportunity to look at what's going to be the best fit for the residents, the city of Johnson City, the JCDA, and LHP.
Thank you.
Do we have any other discussion? Lindsay, if you'll do roll call, please. Lindsay, where did Lindsay go?
Hank Carr, can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. Hank Carr,
Yeah.
Shannon Castillo,
Yes.
Tracy Johnson,
Yes.
Jody Jones,
Yes.
Freddie Malone,
Yes.
Aaron Murphy,
Aaron had to leave the call.
Lindsay Nichols,
Yes.
William Roller,
Yes.
Seth Thomas,
Yes.
Craig Torbett,
Yes.
Robert Williams,
Yes.
and Joe Wise.
Yes.
Thank you, Lindsay. The motion passes. I believe we're now on to new business. The next item on our agenda is the Allied Dispatch Agreement. Diana, will you share with us the extension request for Allied Dispatch?
Yes. So I hope the agenda review that I sent you all earlier in the week helped. But for those of you that were not on the board in 2016, 2017, the JCDA entered into an agreement with Allied Dispatch that was tied to building improvements and renovation, the property on Main Street. But it was also, the agreement was a workforce agreement. The original agreement had Allied hiring 25 corporate level jobs and 50 customer service positions. For several reasons, and they laid it out, some of that in their letter, they have not been able to hire all the CSR jobs or move them to the downtown location, but they have hired 36 corporate jobs. And if you'll look in the original agreement, you will see that the corporate jobs had a value of $6,250 each, whereas the CSR jobs were valued at $1,250. There's some, the market has changed. Some of their clients have gone to more of a app-based operation versus call-in, so they don't need as many CSR jobs, but the technology jobs are increasing, as well as the location that they were going to put the CSR positions was in the lower level, almost really the basement of that building. And due to COVID, they moved people remotely, and they're realizing that there's a real value in letting folks work remotely. So the revision was drafted by Steve Darden, who wrote the original agreement, and it is a one-year extension to create or to have the goal of 50 corporate jobs, but no CSR jobs in that location. Are there any questions?
So if I'm understanding this correct, this is Craig, the total employment base based on how we valued the individual positions for incentive will actually exceed by a pretty large margin what we expected. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Craig, again, move approval of the new agreement or extension of the agreement.
This is Robert, and I'll second. And I think this is great. I mean, I'm all in favor of seeing more and more corporate jobs as opposed to the CSR. Nothing against the CSR jobs; they're very important, but particularly in this day and age, and I think more and more corporations are seeing the benefit of having people working remotely. But I think it's a stronger benefit for the city and the JCDA and all parties involved to have more and more corporate level jobs. So this is exciting for us, and I'm glad to see an employment agreement be successful in Johnson City.
I believe we have a motion and a second. Lindsay, would you like to do roll call?
Yes. Hank Carr. Shannon Castillo.
Yes.
Tracy Johnson.
Yes.
Jody Jones.
Yes.
Freddie Malone.
Yes.
Lindsay Nichols.
Yes.
William Roller.
Yes.
Seth Thomas.
Yes.
Craig Torbett.
Yes.
Robert Williams.
Yes.
And Joe Wise.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Lindsay. And the next item on our agenda is the Downtown Johnson City Foundation Letter of Intent. The transition team has requested the Downtown Johnson City Foundation take over the Main Street program on behalf of the JCDA. The document that was in your packet was approved on Thursday, the 15th of October by the foundation. And at next month's meeting, we'll work on appointing a JCDA representative to serve on the foundation board. Do we have any questions? And do I have a motion to accept this signed version of the letter as submitted?
I have a question. This is Joe Wise. How will the balance of the board for the foundation be established?
So you mean the board members?
Yes.
Yes. So the board voted, they updated their bylaws and went to 9 board members. That includes Craig Torbett, who is chair currently, Shelley Crow, who is vice chair, and then they will add in each committee member, economic vitality, marketing, and design chairs will sit on their board. They've requested that there be a property manager, a business owner, and an ETSU connection on that board, and then JCDA would have a seat. So that would be 9 members. Currently, David Nelson with Founders Forge, Donna Nolan, and Kate Van Huss. We've got an ask out to Kim Blaine, who represents the business owners, has said yes. And we have 2 more that are being considered, or they're considering their position.
So who decides the makeup of that board? I mean, I understand the allotment of chairs, but who decides who the business owner is or the ETSU person is going forward?
The foundation discussed those categories, and I made suggestions on individuals along with several others, and then they will have voted on a slate. So the board,
So it's the foundation board itself who decides who's the foundation board?
Correct.
And then they become 50% of your accountability as the director. I mean, you're kind of working now for 2 boards in that scenario.
Correct. So the board, the foundation board, will submit an annual budget and an annual report to the JCDA And then the JCDA will have at least one seat on the board.
But you would be in the unenviable position of essentially having two different boards to which you were accountable concurrently.
I would, yes, at some point. At this point, the economic vitality is the only committee that I deal with because that's new business and recruitment and small business development. Lindsay, as the marketing manager, works with the other two committees, but the executive director has been serves as the director for the foundation as well.
I'm just, as we work through the project with Dave McCauley, it seems like we're trying to bring focus and clarity, and having a second board involved that comes from a different perspective just seems like a recipe for confusion.
This is Craig. I'll speak to that a little bit. I think while I think that could potentially be an issue, you've also got to kind of understand JCDA and JCDA alone is currently and for the foreseeable future, I can't imagine any scenario where it would change, is solely responsible for employing and providing whatever staff the foundation may receive at this point. The only way that would change is if we were to make a decision at the foundation level to somehow go out and hire our own. And I can assure you there's no intent nor ability in the foreseeable future for that to happen. And furthermore, as you saw in last month's packet, as we outlined kind of the future plans for financing of the foundation, again, JCDA controls a large part of that. Our entire budget is to be submitted each year to JCDA for review. So the extreme likelihood of the two organizations remaining closely tied and assembled and coordinated, I would look not too far distant, although the makeup, to your point, is functionally a little bit different, but very similar to when you had various organizations all under what was the Washington County Economic Development Council and then later NetRep. Each of those had their own separate boards reporting up to a single director who was responsible for satisfying all those boards. So I don't think this is that unusual or that different for us, and I don't envision that much of a change or challenge to Diane.
I guess my only concern is my observation in my time on the JCDA is there have been times where there have been differing governing functions, an executive committee versus the full JCDA board. And at times when trying to understand how priorities are being established and how time is being allocated, there has been difficulty in pinning down exactly who made which decision when, and when a decision got unmade. And I understand what you're trying to do, but it just seems to me it creates opportunities for lots of confusion. And so I'll just leave my comment at that.
Joe, I'll add in here. That part of it, I don't necessarily have a disagreement with, but this is coming out of, this was not the foundation choosing to do this. Foundation was asked to do this by the JCDA board because of what came out of the visioning, where the board chose to take JCDA in a more direct development role and wanted the duties of events of the Main Street organization, all of that to be passed off to a different board. And I think that does allow, one of the benefits that I have seen from it, even though I was not initially in favor of that approach, I've come to support it. And one of the main reasons for me is because I think it allows your board members who have certain interests that don't always overlap over those two main kind of areas. Those that are specifically interested in the development activities to continue to serve on JCDA board. Those who have more interest in fundraising and events and the committee roles of the Main Street program, and certainly serve on the JCDA. And there are some times when there will be overlap, just as there is now with some of the JCDA members serving on various committees for Main Street. I think that will continue. So I think you get some streamlining within the board makeup, and I don't see too much issue with the staffing.
Joe Hankar here. I'll just kind of add in. So I think where we're heading is kind of where we want to head. Joe's point is right. If the JCDA begins to feel that there's a distraction or not a cohesive, a unilateral approach to kind of goal setting and time management, then there's no other choice but to kind of split that job into two parts. And that may happen, it may not, but at the last meeting, I guess the HR committee or Diana championed more of an oversight approach with some folks down below. And so, and I think we adopted that. I apologize, I don't have that in front of me, but look, if the process isn't working, then we'll make an adjustment, because one thing we won't do is we won't back up and compromise on the important objectives of the JCDA. This change was to give us more autonomy and clarity to our kind of what the group feels is their more immediate goal, to Craig's point. But this isn't going to be an easy process. I worry that we're going to have to just fund the foundation out of our budget, if I understand correctly, and this will become a funding challenge for us. And that was not my intention. It become our burden to fund it. But clearly the mission of that organization from a marketing perspective is very important. And I think all we're acknowledging is we're trying to kind of separate into two parallel paths, the development and operations work, and then that marketing and event work. And I don't know how everybody else feels about it.
Hank, I would echo those comments. I feel like that this LOI is doing just that. It's giving us a good path to begin separating those roles so that we can reach that ultimate vision. And those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I'll just close with this thought. I think we've worked really hard to so to speak, kind of clean up our closet a little bit. And Joe's point is well taken. This is adding another layer and another challenge in here. So we cannot become a burden on the JCDA. It has got to become a force multiplier to the JCDA, or we don't, or it separates on its own.
Agree.
Well, and
Ms.
to
Shannon,
that point, if I may,
sorry.
from a funding standpoint, the funding was just transitional in nature. It was never imagined that long-term the JCDA would be the sole or primary source of funding for the Downtown Foundation. It's transitional in nature as they take on these additional duties and responsibilities. So some of what I saw, it scaled down over a 3 to 5 year period. So I think from a funding standpoint, that's the plan.
Freddie, real quickly, and Shannon, I know you've got a comment, but I wanted to just address Freddie real quick on that particular thing. I did want to make it clear, our intent from the foundation side is not to reduce the total dollar amount that the JCDA continues to fund and support the goals. It is that as a percentage of the total amount that we have, that we add in additional sources, making that a smaller and smaller percentage of things. I just want to be clear about that.
Understood. Thanks.
This is Shannon. I think this may not be where we end up long term, but it's a step in the right direction, separating the JCDA roles, which tend to be more technical in nature, more economic development in nature, and the Main Street program, which tends to be more marketing and event based. So even though I also, Craig, to your point where you were like, I wasn't really at first happy about this. I mean, Diana, you made that choice to want to serve two masters. But I do think this is a step in the right direction to start separating these. Now, do I think this is long-term? It may not. I mean, we may do this where we're trying to, I do think it's the right choice to separate these two jobs. But in the future, you may find that we even separate even more and we just have a Main Street director instead of Lindsay doing two things and Diana doing one of them. It may just go to one person. So I think this is a step in the right direction, and it's truly a transition.
Thank you, everyone, for the comments. Do we have a motion to accept this letter as it's submitted?
This is Craig. I'll make that motion.
And do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Lindsay, will you do roll call, please?
Carr,
Yes.
Shannon Castillo, Tracy Johnson,
Yes.
Jody Jones. Oh, sorry. Freddie Malone,
Yes.
Lindsay Nichols,
Yes.
William Roller,
Yes.
Seth Thomas,
Yes.
Craig Torbett,
Yes.
Robert Williams,
Yes.
and Joe Wise.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The motion passes. We're moving into the final items on the agenda. Hang with us, everybody. The next item is the 2021 budget request. Diana has on your screen a revised budget request. The current budget was approved with no funds being used from our reserves in preparation for the payment that would be needed to Home Trust, make to Home Trust for the John Sevier. Now that that payment has been made, we've put together an increase that covers a part-time administrative position that's been talked about with the HR committee. We're looking at about 10 hours a week. Changing the finance and operations manager position, which is Jim Dorton's position, from part-time to contract, or excuse me,
Way around.
changing the position to a part-time position versus contract. And that was a recommendation directly from Blackburn Childers and Stegall. There's a 5% cost of living increase for staff. I believe that would be implemented in the 2021 year. And then also costs that are a little bit higher than we anticipated for office supplies, et cetera, or costs that we'd hoped to take out of the 1920 budget, and then things just didn't bill on time, and some of those bills have come over into the 2021 budget. Last May, when our budget was reduced by the city, we were advised that we could submit a second request for funding, and at this time, the request to the city is for $15,000 to the JCDA, and then $15,000 would come from our operating account. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Diana to answer questions with what's on your screen.
Tracy, did you mean 16,000?
That's my fault. When I did this, I didn't include one line in the formula. I was playing with numbers. So it really is, what's on your screen is, let me show you. Actually.
Oh, so it is 16. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually
16 and 16. Okay.
50. Yes.
Okay. Yes. 16,000 requests from the city. 16,000 would come from an operating account.
And the request would be to fund the 5% raise and the admin position.
Diana, can you speak to that?
I'm trying to share the screen here. Yeah. So, so the request to the city could be allocated. We could say it's for staffing. It's for the administrative and operations section. That total is 21,000, but my recommendation is the JCDA would take $15,000 out of its reserve or operations funding towards this budget. And then the request would be 15,000 for the city.
And I guess my question is, what would the case be to the city? Give it, we need $15,000 so that we can fill in the blank.
So several things. If you go down to our contract services at $2,500, a lot of that line item is us paying to open the parking garage. And so when the construction begins on West Market Street, parking is going to be impacted. So it'd be really not good if we could keep the parking garage and have it available on Fridays for our downtown employees. If the city wants us to say the $15,000 goes to the administrative support, contract services, and our finance and operations manager specifically, we can do that request. But what I just did was just make the complete request towards administrative and operations. If you'll recall, when we were doing our budget, we did a bare bones budget, and then a lot of our estimations on what it would cost to be on our own was just an estimate. So this will help us add the things back in that have been in prior budgets that we took out, and then some of the line items that are running a little bit over. We didn't realize, it comes down to even something so basic as the cost of cartridges for our printer, and our office supplies are going to be over budget. And we took out all of the contract services with the exception of the intern that we had back in this summer.
So Hank Carr here, I have a question. Why are we bringing forth a 5% cost of living increase in the middle of our budget year? I understand that there's a need to address salaries at the appropriate time, at review time, or at specific intervals of contract renewal dates. But why is that coming up now? It doesn't seem like it fits. It seems in an odd place.
So there was not a cost of living included in the last 2 years' budgets. And then also the marketing manager, if you'll recall, she has taken on additional responsibilities. And I think it would be fair to add that cost of living on to that salary as well.
I thought the city took some of our marketing work away. I apologize. I don't know all the details of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. The events coordinator position wasn't cut. It was moved from JCDA to internally at City Hall.
The management of the parks was moved to City Hall. There's still some event, especially when we get to creating things to bring people downtown, whether it's a shopping experience, our Founders After Five music series, that type of thing.
My other question.
We can take that 5% out if.
Well, hang on just a second. So,
right.
So the other was moved, Jim, from a contract to a part-time, and I get why they're doing that. Tell me why that impacts the budget. Are we working more hours than we anticipated, or what's the reasoning behind that, please?
There will be some taxes and that we'll have to pay for a part-time position versus having a contract. But the hours, we looked over Jim's hours, and he is staying within what we have allocated.
Diana, if I recall, that is what Steve Darden recommended, was to be part-time as opposed to the contract. However, the board wanted it to be contract. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, Jim had been doing contract work for someone else, and just was was fine with doing it at contract work. Steve did recommend initially the part-time employee, and then BCS, but due to the work that Jim is responsible for the JCDA, is recommending that it be part-time. I go back to the 5% net rep. What they did, I followed their plan, and they would do cost of living increases at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Yeah, what is this cost of living increase projected to be between 20 and 21 or 19 and 20? I haven't looked that up.
The CPI has been in the 1 to 2% range for several years.
I think 2018 was 3%. Is what I looked up, but I can go back and look at that.
And when do those contracts term and roll over for renewal at review time?
Are you talking when are you asking when the hire dates are? We as the JCDA have not done reviews yet for our employees. The HR committee has something to bring to the board next month for that.
We're talking about employees that that were, with the exception of you, Diana, these are all people we've hired since February, correct?
Correct.
Well, so I'll kind of just speak to the overall big budget concept. And I was one of those people that said, look, we need to live within our means. We cannot keep raiding our reserve account every year to pay for the things that we want. We need to pay for the things that we need and be prepared for a rainy day. And we did a good job of that in the budget process. I commend everybody for digging deep. I'm personally not a fan of raiding the reserve account. At my age in life, having learned that lesson the hard way, on a personal level, it's not the smartest thing to do. And there's some pretty smart people on this call that I'm sure would suggest the same thing. With that said, that money is there for us to spend wisely to invest in the community. So I get what its purpose is. I guess for me, everybody needs to know the John Sevier money is restricted. You can't, no matter whether you saved money there for any reason, you can't use it because the bank has the right to say yes or no to any of that. So any money we save there can't be used without their permission. For me, I would like to see this managed, in a review process at the end of the year. I completely support what we're trying to accomplish here. Proper pay increase, proper reviews, proper pay increases for everybody. That needs to happen. It seems disjointed to sit out here where it is, but that's just my opinion. I'll let somebody else weigh in. If we need to move Jim to part-time and there is an impact there, then I will follow that. But I'm not a fan of doing this mid-year. I want us to get in the good habits back to the review organization, strategic planning. You come up with a plan, you implement the plan. There's always adjustments, but you really need to do everything you can to work the plan before you go pushing the oops button. That's my opinion.
This is Craig. Quick question. The recommendation for the whether you call it cost of living merit or a combination of the two, did that come out of our HR committee, or how did this come to be?
I presented it to the HR committee, and we did have a discussion about the timing of the cost of living. That's when I went back to NetRep and asked when they did it, if they did it at review time or if they did it at the beginning of the fiscal year. And they said that they would do it at the beginning of the fiscal year. But that was a question that we discussed, and Shannon can weigh in on that as well.
So is the HR committee recommending this?
So the HR committee approved the administrative support and the finance and operations manager line item. The professional development is the $3,600. And then my request would be the 5% cost of living because our marketing manager is taking on additional responsibilities. But I can adapt it.
This is Craig again. I'm in favor of following those same guidelines and the fact that we did not do it at the time of the beginning of our fiscal year. But I also believe that, you know, we've got an HR committee for many reasons, but in my mind, this is one of them. I had not given this a lot of thought prior to this, but I'd like to have the comfort of knowing that the folks on our HR committee look over it and give consideration. If they bring it back as a recommendation, we could certainly do it as an additional amendment. As far as the other things, I completely understand the costs associated with transitioning Jim to an employee versus a contractor. And I certainly have no issues with the other recommended adjustments. And to Hank's point, I think good stewardship of the funds and trying to preserve fund balances makes a lot of sense as well. However, I also agree that we're here to dispense this in the way that promotes and moves the whole process forward. And I think everything else on this does that.
Are we authorizing the staff to go to the city for another $15,000 or $16,000? I don't. That's what they're asking us to do. I don't know how that's going to get received at the city's level.
Not well. I mean, right now there needs to be more clarity of what you're asking the city to invest in and what the outcome would be. The one thing that I heard that sounded promising was the garage access, but whether you can justify the dollar amount for that is a different question. This just seems really muddled. There's a lot going on in this request, and I'm concerned about taking on operating expenses out of reserves. You know, I'd much rather spend reserves on one-time expenses. And then we need to go with a much more concise pitch for why the city is being called upon to spend taxpayer dollars that way.
Craig, again, I'm not entirely sure of the appropriate process for moving this forward, but I definitely understand the transition for Jim to employee. I think that's almost a requirement because you can't just choose to call somebody a contract employee if you want to, and I think his duties clearly fall under the guidelines of what would be required to be treated as an employee and therefore a W-2. So I feel like we probably need to move forward with that. I don't know if we can do that without it being a budget amendment, or can we bring a budget amendment back next month to accommodate it? I'm not certain the right protocol there, but that would be my preference, is to move forward with the action on that, come back next month with a proposed budget amendment to address these concerns.
It's a shame, and I have one more question. You have a line item here, Diana, for contract services with an additional request of $2,500. What is that for?
So contract services is our semester intern. We give them a $500 stipend for working 125 hours for us. And so we have one a semester. And then the rest of that is we contract with Access Security to close the garage and then open it. So keeping in mind, this budget would go through the end of June. We would contract with Access as the construction work is being done on Commerce Street to close it on Fridays. There probably is not a need to open it every weekend, except when there's something special going on. But then as we get into the spring and summer, hopefully event season again, we would open and close the garage on the weekends. And so it usually runs us about $300, $350 if we do the full weekend, open and closing.
So currently right now, the parking garage is not open on the weekend?
No.
Interesting.
Currently, the people that have permits, which is Allied Dispatch and some of the people that work along Market Street, can park there Monday through Thursday because the school has evening classes and it stays open. Fridays, the garage is closed at 4:30. And so what is happening is anybody that would normally use it can't use it at all on Friday. So that adds another 50 to 60 cars on the street or in our parking lots on Fridays.
Craig here, and since and I know we're straying a bit from the specific item of a budget amendment, but since it looks like we are likely going to bring a budget amendment back through, I personally would be in favor of putting whatever a budget amendment is required for us to keep the parking garage open consistently on every weekend. I realize it may not get used as much as we'd like right now. But my view of it is the worst possible thing is to come down and think, okay, this is where I'm going to plan to go, and then that's closed, and then you have to look for somewhere else, because next time that person comes down, they're not going to try to go in the garage. I think we need to be consistent with it.
Yeah, let me echo that, Craig. That to me, people are conditioned, and I think if we're going to open it, we need to keep it open reliably, or it's just going to be, it'll always be underutilized if people can't count on it.
In the interest of time, I will make a motion that we table this item and bring back to the board perhaps a revised budget amendment, and I maybe want to see that even as a second line item for whether or not we request this from the city or some part of it, and that we be specific about what request would come from the city.
That would be helpful.
I'll second that motion.
And before we vote, can we pull the cost of living out as a separate consideration and deal with that in the context of the review and tie those things more to an appropriate process?
I would agree with that, Joe. And I feel like that the HR committee is going to come back in the next meeting with some additional forms and review processes. And, you know, in my mind's eye, I do see all of those things kind of tied together in a review manner, as opposed to just it's January 1 or, you know, whatever date it is, and you get a merit raise. So I would agree with that as well.
Hey, we've got a motion in a second, and I like where we're heading here. I'll just echo what Craig said. We need to have that parking deck open every single minute of every single day that it can possibly be open regardless. Whatever it takes, in my opinion, we ought to do. That's just me. And I don't know whether you need money to do that. We need to give her the money to do that right now. But short of that, I'd like to see this broken apart the way that everybody's described.
Should we move forward with the current tabling of the budget request and then come back with a motion to open the parking garage, hiring access back?
You mean for next meeting, or are you wanting to do that today?
Well, I would, if Diana needs to hire access, she needs to be able to pay them today, right, Diana?
Well, we just give her authorization to hire them, and then she can put it in a budget amendment next month and get the money, I believe.
Okay. All right. We have a motion in a second.
To do which thing right now? We're tabling, right?
We're tabling,
and then
but
after that another. Okay.
So why don't I recommend whoever made the motion to table this, to amend your motion that we go ahead and hire access to open the parking garage beginning whenever they can get the staffing in place.
I will amend that motion to include that.
And then I will second that friendly amendment. Is that right? I don't know if this is right.
That's right. Let's go.
Lindsay.
Okay. Hank Carr.
Yes.
Shannon Castillo.
Yes.
Tracy Johnson.
Yes.
Freddie Malone.
Yes.
Aaron Murphy.
He had to leave the call.
Lindsay Nichols.
She had to leave.
Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I only have one computer screen today, so I can't see the squares. William Roller. Seth Thomas.
Yes.
Craig Torbett.
Yes.
Robert Williams.
Yes.
Joe Wise.
Yes.
Thank you all. Motion passes. There's not a chair report, obviously, for this month, as I'm standing in for Brent. But I would personally just like to say a kudos to the JCDA team and committee members that made the breezeway reveal happen. That was a fantastic project. It's a big win for the city, and a big win for the JCDA and all involved. So kudos to that.
Tracy,
Go ahead, sorry.
I apologize. I wanted to make one additional motion on the last item. I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with the transition of Jim's position to an employee position pending approval by our accountants of VCS, that can be done prior to the budget amendment. I just think we need to get that squared away.
I would second that. This is Joe Wise.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Lindsay.
Diana said there was just a message that Diana lost audio.
Diana, can you hear us? Diana?
Nope.
Call the roll.
Okay. Hank Carr.
Yes.
Shannon Castillo.
Yes.
Tracy Johnson.
Yes.
Freddie Malone.
Yes.
William Roller.
Yes.
Seth Thomas.
Yes.
Craig Torbett.
Yes.
Robert Williams.
Yes.
And Joe Wise.
Yes.
Diana, are you back with us? No. Okay. The staff reports are written and are in the packet. Unless, well, I guess Diana can't say anything. Lindsay, if you would like to say anything, that'd be great. Otherwise, they can stand as submitted. And at this point, I'll just ask if anyone has anything else before we adjourn.
I think staff reports can stay as submitted.
Does anyone have anything else? All right, we will stand adjourned. Thank you so much for the meeting time. I appreciate everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Weekend. Bye.
Bye, everybody.